Good morning, everybody. How wonderful to see you. And Deb, thank you for that. That is one of the songs I used to sing at bedtime to Robert. So I'm feeling extremely sentimental this very particular moment, and also being back here at Northbrae. How wonderful to see everyone. I am delighted to welcome you today, especially because we have a special speaker, Joe Lamb, who is an arborist, a poet, a friend, and just a brilliant presence in our community, and I'm so happy to introduce you to him. During the Sacred Story, I will tell you a little bit more about Joe. So for now, I'm just going to jump ahead to some of the announcements. There's a whole lot of stuff going on this week and in the next month or so. Tomorrow, Jay and Judy's meditation group is going on. Next Sunday, Celtic Christianity Sunday. That sounds absolutely fabulous. There's going to be the civics group on May 1st. The crafts group meets on the second and fourth Wednesdays. The book group is reading Unsheltered by Barbara Kingsolver, and they will be meeting on the 22nd. And also, I've got Karen Queen is going to make an announcement about Mother's Day.
Well, actually, I've been asked to make 3 announcements today. The first is that our picnic on Mother's Day will take place in church in just 2 weeks. There's an announcement about it in the bulletin. This is an opportunity to share a social occasion in a safe setting. Tables will be set up both inside Haver Hall and in the parking lot. Bring your own favorite lunch item and then enjoy the delicious lemon bars, strawberry shortcake, and drinks that we've all had at previous Mother's Day luncheons. There will be a $5 charge for dessert and drinks. In order to plan for this event, we need to know how many people are coming. Please take time to find the sign-up sheet in the parlor after church and add your name to it. After 2 years, it is a real joy to finally begin to ease back into enjoying the many social events we've all missed. Now for the second announcement. Barb Foster and June Stoddard are in charge of arranging for coffee hour each Sunday. All of you who have participated in serving during coffee hour know that there is an annual calendar that lists the Sundays when you will be doing coffee hour. The new calendar is now available. Barb and June have created a calendar with the names and phone numbers of those who have participated in the past. Each person has been assigned 1 or 2 dates that they are responsible for. This list is tentative. If you find you cannot participate on the date you are assigned, please find someone to trade with and then let Barb and June know of the trade. Barb and June always phone you prior to your Sunday to remind you. June will distribute the calendars with your names on them today in the parlor during coffee hour. Make sure you find her. This system has worked beautifully in the past and is truly a cooperative effort. And finally, Sharon Lewis would like you to know that she has brought a card for each of us to sign that will be sent to Ron Sebring. So please find her in coffee hour and add your name to the card. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and happy Earth Day celebration. This year, this Sunday fell between Earth Day and Arbor Day, and that is one of the reasons why Carolyn and Joe teamed up to be here today, and it's wonderful to have both of you. And you'll hear more, but they're friends, and they write together, they create together, and there's just this incredible synergy that happens between your hearts, your souls, and your minds, I think. It's wonderful to be in the presence of that. So welcome to you both. And so as we consider Earth Day, for us to just open our awareness, our hearts, our bodies, our minds to the reality that we participate in an incredible mystery that is creation. And we are responsible to that creation, and often historically have been irresponsible and are now paying the consequences for that. So for us to be alert and aware during this service of our accountability to our own bodies, to the body of the earth, to the fact that we together are accountable to future generations. So with that in mind, I invite you to rise for our first hymn, For the Beauty of the Earth, in the Silver Hymnal number 21.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human care, sister, brother, parent, child, for the kinship we all share, for all gentle thoughts and mild, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
Not only are we in the midst of Arbor Day, Earth Day, and a week after Easter, today is Easter Sunday in the Eastern Orthodox Church. And I'm going to light now the candle for peace in Ukraine. And I invite you all to join in a prayer, because what we do and what we feel and what we say, even on this side of the earth, reaches around to the other side.
So let us pray. We pray that strength and courage abundant be given to all who work for a world of reason and understanding, that the good which lies in every human's heart may day by day be magnified, that we will come to see more clearly not that which divides us, but that which unites us, that each hour may bring us closer to a final victory, not of nation over nation, but of us over our own errors and weaknesses. That the true spirit of humanity, its joy, its beauty, and its hope may live among us. That the blessing of peace may come to Ukraine, the peace to build and grow, to live in harmony and sympathy with others, and to plan for the future with confidence. May it be so. Amen.
For the call to worship this morning, we are going to recite the Delight Song by N. Scott Momaday. I will start things off, and this is a wonderful, wonderful poem, prayer, and just charming thing to read about how deeply we can enter into the world around us. I am a feather on the bright sky. I am a blue horse that runs on the plain. I am the fish that rolls shining in the water. I am the shadow that follows a child.
I am the evening light, the luster of meadows. I am the eagle playing with the wind. I am a cluster of bright bees. I am the farthest star.
I am the cold of the dawn. I am the roaring of the rain. I am the glitter on the crust of the snow. I am the long track of the moon in a lake.
I am a flame of 4 colors. I am a deer standing away in the dusk. I am field of sumac and the palme blanche.
I am an angle of geese in the winter sky. I am the hunger of the young wolf. I am the dream of these things. I stand in good relation to the earth. I stand in good relation to the gods. I stand in good relation to all that is beautiful. I stand in good relation to the daughters of Tsian Tanti. You see, I am alive. I am alive.
Praise God, the love we all may share. Praise God, the beauty everywhere. Praise God, the hope of good to be. Praise God, the truth that makes us free. Amen.
We know there are visitors with us this morning, and so you know our tradition, which is to honor diversity in this spiritual community and to acknowledge our unity by each Sunday sharing the words to the Lord's Prayer. And this Sunday, we will use words authored by Barbara Hill, one of our own. She was inspired by Earth Day a number of years ago, and therefore this was specifically written for Earth Day. So please join me. O Creator of all matter, whose sacred name is unknowable, may we build a community on earth in accordance with your intentions for the universe. Grant us the ability to feed ourselves sustainably and overlook our faults as we must learn to overlook the faults of others. Lead us away from all that is unwholesome and divert us from all that is destructive. For all creation, its power and its beauty are yours from infinity to infinity.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in our hearts all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in our hands, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
You may be seated.
I get to tell the sacred story today, and the sacred story is about meeting each other. And it's really lovely to be here this morning, and it's lovely to introduce you to my friend Joe Lamb. One strand in my delight song is to bring good people together, and I am certain that this new relationship between us all will be long and fruitful. In many ways, I feel like I've known Joe forever, or at least the forever since I moved to Berkeley. Joe is also a transplant, coming to Berkeley by way of his childhood in New Mexico, a tour in the Army during Vietnam, and his travels over the continents and hilltops by way of small towns and broad avenues. You may have known him forever, too. You may have seen his company's beige and green logo, Brendy and Lamb, on the arborist truck hither, thither, and yon around Berkeley. You may have seen his crews up in the tops of trees, as comfortable there as they are on the loamy earth. If you've ever eaten dinner at Riverly back in the day, you saw one of his gardens. If you know that Alice Waters has a redwood tree in her backyard, you can be sure that its health is due in part to Joe's careful attention. If you've read the resonant poetry of Brenda Hillman, Bob Hass, Shezal Milosh, or the insightful prose of Houston Smith or Maxine Hahn Kingston, you may have felt something of Joe's presence and care through the living breath of their words. And if, during the fraught days of the 2008 presidential election, and so many events since, however political, societal, or global, if you drive south on Calusa after twilight and see the necessary word hope up in the treetops just before you get to the curve around to Hopkins, you know Joe. Nevertheless, let me make an introduction. Joe is a husband and father, an arborist, an activist, a friend. He is the founder of the Borneo Project, working for decades to return native land to their traditional indigenous human family. Joe is an environmentalist, a poet and writer, with publications in literary and ecological journals. He shows up in the writings of others as a character, a reference, or a muse. I met Joe in person for the first time in one of the tiny postage stamp windows during a Zoom workshop. But his subtle presence and precise comments tended to change the direction of the conversation, always in a deeper manner. Last fall, I was absolutely delighted when during a random breakout session during a 3-hour Zoom seminar, I found myself in the video classroom with Joe Lamb and Carrie Radcliffe, two writers who's taking the class whose wisdom and words I admired most. That lucky combination has resulted in a writers group that meets upstairs in the gallery. In one of our group meetings, I read a piece that I am repurposing from a sermon I gave here at Northbrae. Joe heard of its history and kind of said as an aside, oh gosh, I would love to give a sermon one day. Well, I knew just who to call, and I knew just the group of people who would understand how extraordinary he is. If you ever get a chance, by all means, go for a walk with Joe. On every block around this lovely town, he points out the redwood tree that has a lightning scar, or the flowers that attract butterflies and bees, or the California bluebird and her mate who just have landed on the fence that you can't quite see down the street. He seems to have a sense of how each of these living parts of our community are also a part of each one of us. We thrive when they thrive. And indeed, when you walk with Joe and talk with Joe, there comes a deep piece of understanding that we are not separate from the landscape or from the life all around us. We share community. We exchange life with the life around us with every breath we take, and with every breath we give back. I chose this morning's reading from Leslie Mormon Silko's novel, Ceremony, which we'll hear later, in part because of its poetics and deep understanding. Joe is one of those gifted human beings who understands not only the symbol of the woven web of mourning, but also the light of it and the light within it. He knows the words and the stories behind the words of connection, reciprocity, and all of the world around us. Joe reminds us that we not only see the connections, but we breathe them in. We sing with their throats. We shake with their wind dance. We weep with their raindrops. And so we love this world as we are meant to do. Now Jacqueline will sing a solo.
The solos I've chosen this morning are both about trees, one lighthearted and one more of a sobering and interesting story. And I've been looking forward to doing these for an Earth Day for a long time as well. I talk talk to the trees, but they don't listen to me. I talk to the stars, but they never hear me. The breeze hasn't time to stop and hear what I say. I talk to them all in vain. But suddenly I's words reach someone else's ear, touch someone else's heartstrings too. I tell you my dreams, and while you're listening to me, I suddenly see them come true. I can see us on an April night at a table underneath the stars, having supper in the candlelight to the strumming of guitars. Then I'll tell you how I passed the day, thinking only how the night would be, and I'll try to find the words to say all the things you mean to me. I talk to the trees, but they don't listen to me. I talk to the stars, but they never hear me. The breeze hasn't time to stop and hear what I say. I talk to them all in vain. But suddenly my words reach someone else's ear, touch someone else's heartstrings too. I tell you my dreams, and while you're listening to me, I suddenly see them come true.
Thank you, Jacqueline. We now have the opportunity to share our gifts for the ministry of Northbrae as we sing together the hymn De Coloris, the silver hymnal number 305.
Yes, the colors we see in the springtime with all of its flowers. All the colors when the sunlight shines out through a rift in the cloud and it showers. All the colors as a rainbow appears when a storm cloud is touched by the sun. All the colors abound for the whole world around and for everyone under the sun. the colors of people parading on by with their banners. All the colors, yes, the colors of pennants and streamers and plumes and bandanas. All the colors, yes, the colors of people now taking their place in the sun. All the colors abound for the whole world around and for everyone under the sun. Oh, the colors, yes, the black and the white and the red and the brown and the yellow. Oh, the colors, all the colors of people who smile and shake hands and say hello. Oh, the colors, yes, the colors of people who know that their freedom is won. All the colors abound for the whole world around and for everyone under the sun. De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajaritos que vienen de afuera. De colores es al arco iris que vemos lucir. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí.
Before we go into our joys and concerns, sharing our joys and concerns, I've got a short reading I want to slip in. This is from Ceremony by Leslie Mormon Silko that I mentioned a little earlier. And before I start reading, I just want to ask you all to think back to when you were little and your grandparent was there, and they had some care for you as to what you needed and what you wanted and what you were feeling inside. And I want to ask, when was the last time you were called grandson? When was the last time you were called granddaughter? And try to bring that back. But you know, grandson, this world is fragile. The word he chose to express fragile was filled with the intricacies of a continuing process and with a strength inherent in spiderwebs woven across the paths through the sand hills where early in the morning the sun becomes entangled in each filament of web. It took a long time to explain the fragility and the intricacy because no word exists alone, and the reason for choosing each word had to be explained with a story about why it must be said in this certain way. That was the responsibility that went with being human, old Kuosh said. The story behind each word must be told so there can be no mistake in the meaning of what had been said. And this demands great patience and love.
This is from one of two operas written by Scott Joplin. Only one survived. This is it. One autumn night in bed I was lying, just 18 years ago. I heard a dear little baby crying, while loudly Ned did snore. And the baby's crying seemed to be somewhere near that sacred tree. And It was 12 o'clock, or just before, when the rain fell hard and fast. The baby's cries I heard no more. It had gone to sleep at last. And very quiet it seemed to be, somewhere near that sacred tree. And very quiet it seemed to be, somewhere near that sacred tree. "10 o'clock next morning, the hot sun was shining, and there in rags the baby laid, sheltered by the trees' cool shade. I found it where I thought would be, there beside that sacred tree. I found it where I thought would be, there beside that sacred tree." I took the child into our home, and now the darling girl is grown. All I've said to you is true. The child I've told you of is you. Take not a leaf, but leave them be on that dear old sacred tree. Take not a leaf, but leave them be on that dear old sacred tree. The rain or the burning sun, you see, would have sent you to your grave, but the sheltering leaves of that old tree your precious life did save. So now with me you must agree not to harm that sacred tree. So now with me you must agree not to harm that sacred tree.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Debbie. I really was grateful to hear that. I didn't know that song existed, and it's quite lovely. Thank you. I also forgot to mention that Joe brought gifts for everyone today, and you can pick up a printed broadside in the back. Jay is holding one up on the way out, and also there are sunflower seeds that you can pick some up and plant at home to keep things growing. The readings for today are one for a psalm and one from the Tao Te Ching. Both of them are translated by Stephen Mitchell, who at times has been a local, so I'm not sure he's living in town now, but he's got good translations. Psalm 24. The earth belongs to God, and everything on it is God's light. For God founded it in empty space and breathed the divine's own life breath into it, filling it with manifold creatures, each one precious in God's sight. Who is fit to hold power and worthy to act in God's place? Those with a passion for the truth, who are horrified by injustice, who act with mercy to the poor and take up the cause of the helpless, who have let go of selfish concerns and see the whole earth as sacred, refusing to exploit earth's creatures or foul earth's waters or lands. Their strength is in compassion. God's light shines through their hearts. Their children's children will bless them, and the work of their hands will endure. And Tao number 8 from the Tao Te Ching. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places people disdain. Thus it is like the Tao. In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep it simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you. And now please welcome Joe Lamb.
I felt that Carolyn's introduction was so good that I don't even need to do the sermon here. Oh my God, how do I live up to that? So thank you, Carolyn and Christy, for welcoming me into your community, and thank you for the deep listening when we were talking about today's offering. And thank all of you here for making room at the pulpit for an arborist prodigal son to preach the gospel according to the trees. I feel honored to be in this chapel surrounded by many heroes immortalized on your stained glass and in the company of many of my living heroes in the audience. Thank you all for being here. It's also a great honor to be in the pulpit on this particular day, the Sunday sandwich between Earth Day and Arbor Day. Today, of course, as we've just discussed, is also celebrated as Easter Sunday in both Kyiv and Moscow. Peace be on those in Kyiv and Moscow gathered today to celebrate Easter. Trees, earth, and Easter all have special resonance for me and are deeply rooted in my life, being, soul, whatever you want to call it. One of the joys of tending trees in the Berkeley Urban Forest is that I've met so many wonderful people, some of whom are famous. Another joy is that I've met and sometimes climbed in some amazing trees. I'd like to share with you today some of the lessons that I've learned from the trees and from the people. My first lesson was about humility. Some 30-plus years ago, swaying in the crown of Czeslaw Milosz's scary tall poplar, I learned that there's no shame in hugging a tree. That a Nobel laureate would take obvious pleasure when I told him I had read and loved his poem Into the Tree deepened that sense of humility. Apropos of today's offering, here's a little bit from that poem, from Milosz's poem Into the Tree. And he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way open to the tree of life. Genesis 3:24. And he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. Mark 8:24. Still reading from Milosz's poem, The tree, says good Swedenborg, is a close relative of man. Its boughs like arms join in an embrace. The trees in truth are our parents. We sprang from the oak, or perhaps as the Greeks say, or perhaps as the Greeks maintain, from the ash. Swedenborg and Milosz may have been speaking metaphorically, but trees, if not our parents, are indeed our relatives. The dawn redwood just outside here, lifting up the sidewalk with its roots, shares 50% of her DNA in common with the humans gathered inside this chapel. These are the questions that I take away from the Genesis text. In the world we live in today, who are the cherubim? What is the flaming sword keeping open the way to the tree of life? And where are the boundaries of the garden? That's a question for Lucy in the back, actually, about the cherubim. But lesson number 2, it's never just about trees, it's about people and trees. We'll meander back to the garden questions later, but first I'd like to tell a story about how lesson number 2 was written in bold letters on the pages of my life and how it grew into lesson number 3. In 1990, I was asked to carry a letter from the city of Berkeley to Umabawang, a Cayenne longhouse on the Baram River in Malaysian Borneo. The letter proposed that Berkeley and Umabawang, as preposterous as it sounds, be joined as sister cities. I love Berkeley. We live in a city named in honor of Bishop Berkeley, which we now pronounce Berkeley, who is immortalized in one of your stained glasses. He was an Irish philosopher and theologian, most widely known for his question, if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, did it actually fall? In some senses, the city of Berkeley was updating Bishop Berkeley by making his question appropriate to the age in which we live. If entire forests fall and no one hears about it in social media, do they really fall? Or more importantly, is there any way to keep them from falling? More logs were shipped from the rainforests of Borneo in the 80s and 90s than from all of South America and Africa combined. Rainforest destruction is an old story, way too common in too many places. But what's unique, inspirational, and ultimately hopeful is that indigenous peoples around the planet have been rising up and defending the garden. They have been rising up in Borneo for decades. In the late 1980s, our sister community of Umabawang, from little kids to elders, gathered to blockade the logging roads used to clear-cut their land. Many of the villagers were arrested and treated very badly in jail. We in Berkeley hoped that the sister city designation would raise consciousness and garner support in the U.S. for the radical idea that indigenous people deserve human rights. I must confess, I went to Berkeley as a kind of tree missionary. But my first night in the longhouse, after way too much rice wine and after dancing in a hysterically pathetic rendition of the warrior dance, much to the amusement of my hosts, I had something of a drunken conversion experience. If my first lesson was about humility, and my second lesson was that it's about people and trees, my third was that defending the garden is really about communities and forests. Here is where it gets a little messy. Luckily, I have my humility to protect me. When I was a kid running around in the forests of northern New Mexico, I fell in love with the beauty and majesty of wildlands and developed a lifelong case of biophilia, the love for the natural world. stand in a grove, in an aspen grove in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in late September when the leaves are luminous yellow and trembling in the breeze, and I bet you will feel the same call home, the call back to earth, or as Joni Mitchell sang with such haunting urgency, the call back to the garden. Out of that love for the natural world, I became an environmentalist, dedicated, as I thought at the time, to protect virgin wilderness against the onslaught of man. But here's the messy part. According to Yadvinder Mali, an Oxford ecologist who I met because of his work on carbon flow in the Borneo forests, quote, "The concept of wilderness as a place without people is a myth. Where we do find large biomes without people living in them and using them, as in North American national parks, Amazonian forests, or African game parks, it is because of a history of people being removed from those lands through disease or by force." So one of my guiding principles of protecting virgin wilderness untouched by man turned out to be a sexualization of nature. And worse, that way of looking at the world has reinforced the destructive fantasy that humans are somehow separate from nature. Tragically, the virgin wilderness idea has been used to exclude indigenous peoples from land that they have tended, in some cases, for tens of thousands of years. On my first trip to Borneo, Jock Jiao, the headman of our tropical sister longhouse, took me to a patch of forest with a crazy profusion of trees and vines, butterflies glowing luminous in the air, flitting all around us. I exclaimed, "Wow, what a beautiful wilderness." To which Jock responded, "This is my father's garden." Silly me. Lesson 1, humility. In some places, the wilderness is the garden. The garden is the wilderness. Recent science shows that the most diverse places on Earth, including the rainforests in the Amazon and Borneo, are that way because they've been tended by indigenous people for thousands of years. It's getting even messier still, wonderfully messy. Yadvinder's observation is not an argument against setting land aside in refuge for plants and animals. Quite the opposite. Indigenous lands have the greatest abundance of plants and animals because their traditional systems, grounded in their spiritual beliefs, do exactly that. In Borneo, native peoples have traditionally set aside vast tracts of land free from farming, lands that act as refuges where the forest can heal herself. How well does this traditional forest management system work? Well, to quote Yadvinder again, "High biodiversity is compatible with, and in some places a result of, people living in these landscapes. Working with local and traditional communities and learning from them is essential if we try to protect biodiversity." So another lesson I've learned is that even in my best intentions, I can be right and wrong at the same time. Let's come back from the durian tree in Jock Jiao's wilderness garden to a tree growing in the urban forest just a few blocks from the church down that direction. I had the great honor of pruning Houston and Kindred Smith's apricot plum. Houston, I'm sure that many in this congregation know, was one of the world's great scholars of religion. But before we talk about Houston and Kindred's tree, a quick digression. Decades ago, at a party with Berkeley progressives, also just a few blocks from here, an Irish-American friend asked me, "Are you Catholic or Protestant?" I replied that my religious beliefs were complicated and still evolving, that I had studied many faiths, including Buddhism, and that I would really like to learn more about Native American religious beliefs. Her response, "So you're a Protestant?" No, but her comment segues nicely back to Houston's plum. Pruning out the deadwood and removing the crossing branches, I became lost in a reverie about religion, trees, and evolution, and about how the world's faiths are root-fused and tangled in the always evolving human psyche. In a time requiring the evolution of consciousness, I found hope in the evolution of Houston's own thought. His most widely read book, often used as a college text, was initially titled The Religions of Man. As Houston's consciousness evolved, probably from the promptings of Kendra, his brilliant wife and insufficiently credited collaborator, Houston acknowledged the implicit sexism in the title and renamed it The World's Religions. But the mark of a great mind is that it continues to evolve. Seeing the error of even his best intentions, Houston expanded the later editions to include Native American religions, which had been omitted in the previous ones. And in some senses, probably out of atonement, in 1999, he accompanied a delegation of Native American religious leaders to the World Parliament of Religions in Cape Town, South Africa, where they declared understanding the world's religions is impossible without including indigenous religions. Thank you, Houston and Kendra Smith, for demonstrating how consciousness can evolve. Lessons from People and Their Trees, number 5, consciousness evolves. As a case in point, my consciousness about evolution has recently evolved. When I studied evolutionary biology back in the 1980s, Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene, was taught as a kind of scientific gospel. The main premise was that evolution rewarded selfish actions. This individualistic idea of nature dominated not just academic biology, but also forestry practices. To reduce competition and encourage growth, foresters planting pine seedlings would douse herbicides on the sprouts of naturally occurring aspen and birch. Turns out that's not the way tree survival works. Suzanne Simard, herself a third-generation forester, discovered that what's really going on beneath the soil is not a war. In fact, it's more like the Cheeseboard Collective. Leaving the wild birch and aspen enhanced the survival and growth of the planted pines and firs. Sharing, not hoarding, Simard discovered, is how trees survive. In 30 years of further study, she uncovered a complex and mysterious underground universe of roots and fungi woven into a tangle we now call the Wood Wide Web. Simard found that trees send nutrients to other trees in need. They also send messages warning about insect pests and diseases. The next time you walk around on the forest floor, feeling the soil beneath you that keeps you upright, think about the wood wide web underneath your feet, humming with tree talk. So lesson number 6 is that trees as metaphors and as physical beings have much to teach us about the evolution of consciousness. For one thing, trees teach us how to endure. They have to endure droughts, fires, floods, winds, outbreaks of insect pests. Trees have nowhere to run and no place to hide, but they can take refuge in community, in what the Buddhists call Sangha. In community, they shelter each other from storms, and they nourish each other through their roots. Just like what happened here in this community earlier today when you guys were sharing your prayers for each other. So, homework assignment. When you leave church today, put your hand on a tree outside and greet a relative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very moved by what you have shared. Please rise now for our final hymn, where we will celebrate the web of life. Number 175 in the Silver Hymnal.
We celebrate the web of life, its magnitude we sing, for we can see diversity in every living thing. A fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in quail, as much in tiny barnacle as in the great blue whale. Of ancient dreams we are the sum, our bones link stone to star, and bind our future worlds to come with worlds that were and are. Respect the water, land, and air, which gave all creatures birth. Protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth.
Go now into the world with renewed awareness of trees, of humility, of the evolution of our own awareness, and allow yourself to be blessed and called into reverence by the life that we share with the trees, with each other, with the earth herself. Go in peace. Amen.